Hello, party people, and welcome to Law Candor. I am your co-host, Bill, and I have some exciting news to start off the show. I am thrilled to announce that I have a new co-host, my colleague, Paige Hunt. I've known Paige forever, and when Rob Hellawell decided to move on to bigger and better things, I know that's a low bar, this is just eDiscovery, Paige was the first person we thought of, and she actually threw her hand up. Paige, I can't tell you how excited we are to have you as a co-host for this season and going forward.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks. I'm thrilled to be here. You know, they asked me to come on board to help out because you really need some energy with this podcast. It's really been lacking with your presence, right? So
I need someone to keep me in check. That Hellawell didn't keep me in check. That's really what it is, more than anything.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Always excited to talk to folks in the industry, meet folks, bring, the latest and greatest to our audience. So really thrilled to be here. A little bit about me. I've grown up in law firms, I say, for the first 15 years of my career. I started off at Fulbright and Jaworski, moved over to Perkins Coie. So been in eDiscovery for longer than I ever imagined I would be. Been over at Lighthouse now for about 8 years and thrilled to be here again, just working and having these conversations with us. So thanks for letting me join.
We love having you. And as one of our first interviews for the podcast together, Paige and I had the privilege to have a fascinating conversation with Ricupero, who is the Associate General Counsel and Head of Global Information Governance, eDiscovery, and Legal Analytics at eBay. We had the chance to dive into how a dynamic combination of new technology and human expertise is really helping to usher in a series of new approaches to review and analytics that can help tackle modern day data challenges, which is the type of information we always like to bring to our listeners. However, before we get to that conversation, which is fascinating, we must first discuss
sightings of radical brilliance.
Of course, this is the part of the show where we bring to you the latest and greatest of news and noteworthy innovation and sheer acts of genius. And this one is something I think that we're all starting to do in our spare time, whether you're, some people are on TikTok, some people are on Instagram, and some people do this thing with AI and art and we found the story on wired.com, and it's called, am I pronouncing this right? DALL-E Mini. It's basically this new AI meme machine where, you type in things like ducks and Monet, and then you get a ducks and Monet painting right there before your eyes. It's really cool. If you have not played with it before, you should get on there and try it. And this article gets into it to some degree of detail. Paige, what did you think about this?
Fascinating. Wordle on steroids, right? Maybe it's actually like, an analogy for, search terms and how we deal with things historically and then what the future holds with analytics and such. So it's definitely worth a read.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny the way it ties in here. You would think, well, what does this have to do with what you guys are talking about? Well, it's basically an AI model that makes images by drawing on statistical patterns it gleaned from analyzing about 30 million labeled images to extract connections between words and pixels and everything else. And the algorithms generate custom photography and artwork. And, and people are using it. It started as sort of a goof, like a pastime. And now people are actually starting to create some pretty cool things. There's some Twitter accounts that are posting some things on here. It's actually very cool. So I would check out the article is on Wired. It was Will Knight's article. The DALL-E Mini is the internet's favorite AI meme machine is the article title. Check it out. And now we're going to jump into our conversation with Kara. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this.
Hi, Kara. Welcome to the podcast today. How are you?
Good. How are you? Great to be here.
Well, we like to start off by asking our guests to tell us a little bit about their background and how they've ended up in their current role.
So I was a full-on litigator in private practice for about 13 years and had dabbled in the eDiscovery area, certainly, particularly when the big eDiscovery new rules started coming out in 2004, 2005. And a former colleague of mine approached me when the position at eBay came up for eDiscovery. And quite honestly, at first, I was not that intrigued, was a little interested in going in-house, but thought, how exciting would it be to just focus on this one area? After I talked to a couple people in eBay, it became much, much more interesting to me, and I did want to get on board. And so I came over to eBay for that reason. When we split with PayPal, I was able to get a larger role that included information governance in addition to eDiscovery, and it kind of blew up from there. And what I certainly found out is that I'm not bored, that's for sure. So all my fears were alleviated about that pretty quickly in the job.
Well, let's talk about like big data challenges. You know, with the way businesses are sort of creating and amassing all this data, you know, legal is forced to deal with this, right? Business is just going to operate the way business is going to operate, and creates problems for legal. So, you know, whether it's information governance, review, analytics, what are the biggest data challenges that you've been encountering and seeing so far, you know, in your time in the industry lately?
Yes, in recent years, data has really exploded. We've gotten to a point when I first got on the job, there's part paper in these files. Now there's nothing. It's just data.
Backup tapes.
Yep. There's no more backup tapes that I'm dealing with. But it's really exploded, and getting our hands around what's where, making sure that people are following the right protocols to put things in the right places, because we were looking at just hundreds of terabytes of data across the enterprise in recent years, and not knowing what some of the stuff even was. We had about 70 some filers that they wanted to decommission, and came to me and said, hey, let's decommission these. The problem is no one knew it was on them. And it was data going back to when the company started. It exploded and continued to be proliferating data basically everywhere. Now we had it in the cloud and everything else. So from my perspective, I would say getting your hands around what exactly do we have? Should we still have it? And where's the best way to access it when we do need it, to the extent that it's stuff that we should still have and not have deleted it already.
Kara, what kind of technology did you use to help address these challenges? How did you identify it?
Honestly, when we first started down the road, you know, I mentioned in the last question that we realized that we had all this data and people want to get their hands around it. Had a couple other challenges going on with divestitures and things of that nature, and wanted to clean up. Privacy, was very concerned about the over retention of data. And when we started looking at the different data sources and just how old it was, we struggled. We went out and we talked to numerous experts and vendors about what's the best way to do this, because scanning, you know, some people are saying, well, let's load it all into something else and scan it there. So it's like, great, now I've got 2 copies of, you know, 600 terabytes of data, not to mention the amount of time that it would take to do those full scans. So we really shopped around. We talked to a lot of different people. I talked to other folks in my job in the industry at other companies, and came up with a good plan, really. We engaged with H5 and Lighthouse and worked with a scanning tool known as Varonis to scan all the filer data to the extent in place, because that was a big concern of mine. As I mentioned, I did not want to drag it somewhere else and do all that. But knowing that we could not scan basically everything, we pulled indexes based on file type, file name, last used date. And we started out by using those metrics and those pieces of metadata to really start funneling down what the right data set was.
So, you know, was leveraging insights from an initial matter in other places always a goal, or did you discover the data had broader applications in the process, and what were those applications?
Oh, we discovered as we went. So once we got down this journey and we were doing different like keyword analysis and everything to figure out, hey, what's where and whose is it? Because as a company, many people probably don't know this about eBay, but we actually own and have previously owned a lot of other companies. ECG was our European classifieds group, StubHub, PayPal. So there, when we started looking into this data, one of the biggest concerns was, you know, what's appropriate to get rid of? What shouldn't we have anymore, right? And as we started to do that, we realized we were about to sell off StubHub at the time. And we realized, hey, we can leverage this to figure out what data they need to take with them and what things they're not allowed to take with them. And we kind of started seeing different ways that we could really break down the data and leverage what we were finding out to know this is what we package up. Because in the old days, it was like, you know, take your computer and walk across the street. Well, now we've just given a new company all of our data that was on that device or in that filer or what have you. So we were able to be much more surgical as these other things came down the path. And we saw other opportunities because we were seeing, you know, we were doing some more analysis and seeing, you know, we've got 500 and some terabytes of data here, but only 40 terabytes have been accessed in this many years. So all these different types of insights, and we were started leveraging for larger divestitures, M&As, and in particular, other just data cleanup projects, particularly with our privacy colleagues who were getting very concerned about ensuring that we were cleaning up data in that realm as well.
Yeah, and that leads us to really talking about partnership with other stakeholders in the business. It seems like that is critical in these efforts. So how did you work with others in the business to leverage analytics?
Well, first of all, about partnering with other parts of the business, this particular project that started for me back in 2019 and is still getting closed out today, gave me an opportunity to get to know so many more people in the business and so many more business partners, and to really understand, where all the bodies are buried. I used to joke around and say every new case that comes in for eDiscovery is like a Scooby-Doo mystery for me. I have to figure out what the data is. And this gave us a new starting point where we really have a working true inventory. I feel like a lot of times companies will do a data inventory or data map, and it feels like a car. The minute you drive it off the lot, it loses all this value. It's like the minute you're done with the inventory, it's done. This gave us a different type of inventory where we understood better which system is being used for which process and who those points of contact are. So to your original question about how it works with other partners, these business partners, we were able to better get them to understand what our concerns were. Because some of our businesses that we went to, they're like, we love this data. We want to keep all of it. We're like, we're not using it. And here's all the risk and the cost that's really associated with this. And when we get to litigation, instead of going through, 2 terabytes of data, I want to go through 10 gigabytes. And you're not allowing me to do that. They were really receptive, and it allowed me to make new connections in new places and really open up opportunities in other areas. Some of these groups didn't even know we were there. And since this project has really exploded and went through the entire enterprise, I now have other teams that we never used to work with coming to our team for every new thing that comes on. Every new divestiture now, my team gets tapped to say, hey, Kara, we've got this list of people. They're going to the other company. Here's where they use their data. Go figure out for me what they can take and what they can't take. So those types of different processes, we've been able to get into the fold and the mix and have those great points of contact and information to leverage. And frankly, they're leveraging the analytics and the metadata that we've created on their side to get better insights as well.
Before I get to my next question, I was just going to tell you, if you could do me a favor and clear your calendar for the next 3 months, I'm going to take you to visit all of my clients because I think that they would all benefit from this. And they don't believe a word I say. So maybe if I bring someone with your level of credibility, we can convince them. So, but let's talk about with all these analytics and what you've learned about the capabilities of analytics and overall intelligence that you've gathered, has it changed your approach?
Yeah, it's definitely tweaked that. It's changed the approach. I think we've been able, again, to not to kill the term too much, but be more surgical in those cases. When we get a big case, we know people aren't storing things here. They are there. And these are some folks that we can talk to, or also leveraging more internal analytical and metadata type stuff before we even send it to a vendor. So we can further cull down the data set before we're even going to look at it. Looking at, trends on how people were using things, where they are. And again, even more importantly, opening us to different points of contact that we didn't necessarily know were there anymore. I mean, that's also been a huge revelation as well. And to be honest, you talk about talking to your other clients. I get the resistance. I had it too. And the company had it when we first started down this journey because it's a heavy lift. And it's kind of like asking people to throw out their first child's baby shoes or something. It's like just in case, I might want to look at it someday. So there's a lot of resistance in getting the business on board with it. But now we've all seen a huge benefit. We've also seen different trends in how people are treating the data because I've got people in our collaboration team and other IT teams that are looking now at trends. We saw, something like 70 some terabytes of data were on individual Google Drives. That's data subject to loss. If someone's not on hold and they leave our company, we don't have it. Not to mention the fact, even if we have it, we don't necessarily know where to look for it because not every case comes with a clean list of, hey, here are the right points of contact that you need to put on legal hold. So we've been trying to drive behaviors where the people on the teams we'll move those things to Google shared drives. And we also use Microsoft. We like to use everything here at eBay. So SharePoint. So we've basically we saw a huge trend where we had 77 terabytes of data on Google OneDrives, and that's reduced to 40 some terabytes. And then on the flip side, we've seen a huge increase in the shared drive usage, both on SharePoint and on Google Drive. Now that helps me as an eDiscovery professional find that data much more quickly without having to delve into individuals, data repositories through the old traditional way of calling everybody up and saying, hey, can we talk to you, Lucy? We need to know where you keep your data. Now we're able to do some broader searches ourselves and know, we've identified Lucy. She's got a lot of hot docs over here. We need to talk to her more. We need to bring her stuff in.
What has helped you better understand risk across parts of the business?
All the insights that we've received, I think have definitely increased and opened our eyes about risk. Finding out people's patterns, really understanding better that a lot of people are not following certain processes that we've put in place to know where our records are, where our key records are, not just for litigation, but even for compliance purposes. There's certain things that we need to report on with regulators, particularly now that we're doing payments. We're a money services business now, a highly regulated area. So it allowed us to get more insight into where there were some gaps about how people were handling their data, and then go in and tweak those processes and drive people to better data organization and better data management.
One of the most fun parts about my job is I get to I don't get to listen to, I demand that I be included in some roadmap calls with my developers just because I find it so interesting. How do you think utilizing analytics will evolve as data and review continue to change? What kind of problems do you think it could help solve?
I think it really helps solve some of the blind spots that teams have in both the compliance and the litigation area. I think it also helps the business better understand the types of actions that they have to take, the gaps that they have on their side when, to your point about meeting with the developers, I think that's key. In the old days, a lot of folks didn't know when they were onboarding a new system, they should really talk to our team about how are we going to handle legal holds? How are we going to handle reporting? Now that they know better what we do and where we are, I think they're coming to us, like I said, to find out what what our analytics are, what our metrics are, and leverage those types of things, both in implementations and processes and all that other fun stuff. But another way I think utilizing analytics is evolving is really just improving the data quality that we have. I see a lot of active learning models that we're trying to implement in all sorts of areas, not just what us eDiscovery people think of, the TAR models where we've got a seed set of documents and we're going to find the best things here. We're using those active learning models to do things like identify counterfeits on our site and get them off the site, and to do different things like that. Basically thinking outside of the box. How can information governance and eDiscovery and our tools really help the business to use our capabilities in analytics and AI to make the business better as a whole, not just to make our litigation cheaper and quicker and better as well, although we do want to continue to do that.
Well, thank you for joining us today. This has been an interesting conversation. To Bill's earlier point, I think organizations like yours are really few and far between at this point. We're not seeing everyone rush to really address information governance in the way that you've described the journey. So it's impressive. I hope everyone will enjoy hearing about the benefits that your organization has been reaping with risk control and cost control as well, and hopefully it'll incentivize some others to think about it a little bit differently.
Yes, I hope so.
Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. And one more thing I did want to add was just to the developer point. One of the things that we really keyed in on is letting these other teams know we're not here. They think of legal as the no guy, right? And the more difficult guy. We really have worked really hard to let these different teams know when I'm sitting in, I want to help the business. I want to help, I'll lean into some risk if we need to drive a better business result, but we can't ignore it and we can't not partner together. It's just absolutely critical. So as they start to see us more as their friend and not their stop person, we've actually been able to get in on more of those conversations with developers and other folks. So Thank you guys for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it.
I think the combination of the substance in this podcast coupled with your examples and metaphors of the Scooby-Doo reference was great. And also the baby shoe metaphor was fantastic. So I think this is going to be a really great podcast for our listeners. Just if those two things alone, let alone the substance in it. Thank you so much, Kara. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today on Law Candor. Again, I'm thrilled to be joining the podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show, follow us on Twitter at Law Candor for future updates and news.